Hello, I want to welcome you to the Our Revolution Helena program. My name is Frank Kromkowski. I'm one of the members of Our Revolution Helena. Our Revolution Helena is an offshoot of the Helena for Bernie Sanders group, which was formed in May 31st of 2015 to get Bernie Sanders on the ballot. And then, of course, we were successful in having Bernie Sanders win the presidential primary in June of 2016. We've been meeting ever since and are now part of a national movement called Our Revolution, which was also started by Bernie Sanders. We have legislative priorities which include issues, a variety of issues, including increasing the minimum wage to a living wage, decreasing the jail population. We have about 10 or 12. But today, our program is going to focus in on a topic that is one of our legislative priorities, and that priority is to expand and protect campaign finance reform and accountability and eliminate dark money in politics. So the real topic today is getting big money and corporate manipulation out of politics. And I have two guests who are here to discuss this with me, Sue Kirchmyer from Missoula and Jim Smith from Helena. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll talk about some recent events and about that topic of big money, big politics.
Okay. Well, as I said, my name's Sue Kirchmyer, and I've been working with Move to Amend for about 4 or 5 years, and I'm an RN. I've always been really concerned about fairness and about the values of making sure all our voices are heard. And so that's how I got interested in Move to Amend. Move to Amend itself is a national organization that has an amendment in the U.S. House now calling for corporations aren't people, money isn't speech. And so that we're able to manage our own country rather than having it be controlled by corporations or entities that really aren't responsible to the people. Mm-hmm. They're responsible to stockholders. Mm-hmm. And so now in Montana, we have Montanans Move to Amend. We're reaching across the state. We've met recently in Helena, and we have been invited to a number of other cities too, because it really needs to be something that's voiced throughout the state. And we're really excited about it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live here in Helena, have for about the last 15 years, and I'm retired at this point. But I've been involved in progressive politics most of my life and had a successful career in business. But now that I'm retired, I'm trying to put my focus on the kinds of things that we need to get done to bring democracy back to America, because I think our democratic institutions are under assault, and that has been going on for over 40 years. And just sort of slowly see the erosion of people's engagement in their citizenship. And I think it's important for us to re-engage everybody so that we can, as Sue said, take back control of our destiny and not let the commodification and corporatization of politics be what rules this country. So I believe in we the people, and that's part of our sovereignty is we the people, not we the corporation. So,
And of course that relates to one of the main topics we'll talk about, which is the Citizens United decision by the U.S. Supreme Court in January of 2010. But there was a lot of talk about all of this at the April 28th meeting here in Helena that we attended, along with at least 50 others. And the topics there were why we need to overturn Citizens United. Mm-hmm. But we also touched on a lot of other topics, and I think they all relate to the themes of the Montanans Move to Amend organization and its work.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I think there's so many issues, and the main thing that Move to Amend and Montanans Move to Amend does is it's working on getting at the root of a lot of what we see, and it helps people to have a format, structure to put the pieces together in, so that we're not constantly putting out fires everywhere, but you can work on your issues, but know that there's going to be an important step that we need to take if we're ever really going to make a change that can stay. For sure, there's we can get so scattered in our I don't know exactly what I want to say, but Citizens United was another step. It'd been going on for, you were talking about the last 40 years, and of course, when you talk about the history of how our country has been changed from being responsive and based on democracy. Granted, everybody's had to fight for their piece of that democracy. But at the same time that we were fighting for those pieces of the democracy, the corporations were trying to change their definition also to being not just a creation of something that was necessary in order to get work done. They over time have actually changed their definition by going through the courts into being an entity that really suddenly becomes more of a person under the Constitution. So that's the kind of thing we were talking about on the 28th of how that whole progression has come along. And that how artificial that is. I mean, there have been court cases that have said, oh, okay, with this, in this court case, then you have, you can come along with like the 14th Amendment and become a person. And here you can come along and now you no longer are responsible to your country. Now you're responsive as a corporation to the stockholders, and so you no longer have that, you have an entity that's gotten stronger and stronger and stronger, that's no longer responsible to the Commonwealth and to our common interests and is driven irrationally.
So it sounds like, just using the term Citizens United, that you wouldn't want to overturn Citizens United. It sounds like it's a good thing, except that the Supreme Court decision called Citizens United was apparently a very bad thing.
Well, Citizens United isn't about citizens being united. It's about a particular film that was taken to the Supreme Court because of, and I can't, sorry, I'm not like a lawyer, but still, it was taken to the Supreme Court. They had a narrow decision to make about whether it was electioneering too close to the election, something like that. But instead, it was changed into a ruling that had just earth-shaking ramifications of then saying, for sure, putting the final stamp, or one of the final stamps, that corporations are people and money is speech, and we can no longer control money in politics. And when you look at what Montanans been doing, since 1912, we had the Anti-Corruption Act, and we were controlling corporations and controlling money in politics. And we had 100 years of that suddenly the Supreme Court struck down, and then when we went back and said, you've got no grounds to do that here, they struck down our own Montana laws.
Well, I can remember in January of 2012, 100 years after the initial Montana legislation to rein back corporate influence on politics, that there were 50 of us there in the snow and rain congratulating our Montana Supreme Court for standing up to the decision, which was, and then of course the Supreme Court again knocked down our Montana Supreme Court's resistance to this decision.
And what was cool about that was that everybody, I think, was so affronted by it because Montana was specifically struck down that when we had our initiative in 2012, 75% of Montanans, which means that it's a transpartisan issue. Everybody wants fair elections. They want to be able to control them. So 75% of people across the state voted for the initiative to say corporations aren't people, money isn't speech. And not only just 75%, but every county, all however 50 counties passed it, had more than 50% in every county. So it wasn't, and see, that's the thing with Montanans Move to Amend. And with Move to Amend, we have, there's a petition there calling for the amendment, and they want to get to 1 million, and they're now at 451,000. signers of that petition. And they're in the Congress now. We're going to have another leadership summit. They're lobbying and so forth. And right now there are 55 sponsors in the U.S. House. We don't have any senators yet, but we do have a strong showing from one of our senators who, after the initiative passed, we had instructed our congressional delegation to support this. 75% support it. And so Tester did put in the Corporations Aren't People amendment, and he's carried that forward too. So, I mean, people really heard that. And it's not uncommon across the country for it to pass 75 or 80%.
Yeah. Well, it's really important that we get this done because we have, everybody keeps, part of the issue is we call it dark money because we can't find out how much is being spent on various elections. And the prediction is that this cycle, this election cycle coming up for the midterm here in 2018, that there will be more money spent on a midterm election than in any election, any midterm election in the history of the country. And the Koch brothers have come out and said that they're going to give $750 million, $750 million to this election cycle, which is more money than both the Democrats and the Republicans will spend together. And so we have this one group, of corporate interest that's, they're billionaires. They can funnel their money anyway. They can spend it any way they want, apparently. But what this disastrous Supreme Court decision has allowed is a situation where they can funnel the money wherever they want. And we all know, of course, that it isn't the case that if you spend money on a politician, that he or she isn't beholden to you now. That's a myth. That's, if you believe that, well, then you believe in the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and some other things.
And even if they're not beholden, they're intimidated.
They're beholden.
Yeah. Well.
It's a different form of beholden, right?
Yeah,
Sue? Yeah.
right. I mean, they're afraid to vote because of the power of are they going to be singled out in the next election? I mean, you don't have to look far to find out people are being singled out for sure.
Yeah, it's another piece of the thing. I mean, you talk to some people who are in the House of Representatives. They run for election every 2 years, and so some of these folks have said, what do they do the day after they get elected? They start trying to raise money for the next election. And when they're in Washington, there's a special building that people from the House of Representatives from the Democratic Party go to the one building and the Republicans go to this other building, and there are these cubicles, and they sit down at a phone and they start dialing for dollars to the big money constituency back in their home state to get reelected again. They're not talking on the phone with the real citizens of constituency. They're talking to the people who have money. And so it's become, people wonder why there's the gridlock. These people are not doing their job because their full-time job is raising money for their own reelection. It's an absurd system we've allowed this thing to deconstruct into at this point, I would say.
Can I, there's something I think is good to bring up too, is that we do have Disclose Acts, the Disclose Act here, and it's been a really important progress. I mean, given what the Supreme Court's doing, there's some room to do something else. But even with the Disclose Act, we find that it doesn't stop the money from coming, and it doesn't even necessarily stop them from breaking the law. I mean, recently we had a $30,000 fine, which is a good thing against a 2010, I think, infraction against campaigns. And then this year again, we've already got another case of the same thing happening by another dark money that a legislator has brought, the same kind of complaint to the Commissioner on Political Practices, who is one of the strongest enforcers in the country, which is good. The other thing that I wanted to be sure to bring up is that the kinds of the result, and this is where I think it's important to look at how things hang together, at least for my money, for the way I look at it. I mean, I'm an RN. And I've been working with people who are low income and people with disabilities and so forth. And they've just been socked, really, I mean, just terrible, as far as the way the budget is and so forth. And we can look at what's going on in our state, but you have to also look at, to my mind, the kinds of policies that happen when we have been starving our commons and our ability to have money that we can manage as a country, to where now, I mean, the wealth inequality and the moving of the money to the top, to the 1% and so forth. Their goal is to pull all that money up there, and then they decide where it goes to the colleges, where it goes to the symphony, what it does. If they can put their stamp on it and name it after them, that's where it's going to be. And what happens then is when you starve the commons and you've got a budget that it has been starved, and then you take it down to the state level and you make us work with that. I mean, you're fighting each other for the money. Divide and conquer, race, ethnicity, the works. Our job is to hold people together and make sure that we have a strong movement that respects everyone, because that's the only way that we're going to pass something like an amendment. I mean, this is not an easy job to get an amendment done, but we've done it any number of times. You have to fight for every one of these things. And the corporations, I mean, it's a matter of human rights now, because people are being hurt. And we have to look at it as something we need to get to as far as the root goes. And this is one of the few organizations that still is talking about the corporate influence. There's any number, everybody's got a lot of issues, but I think this issue needs to be addressed by every one of us. And it has to include the corporate influence, because they're irrational. There is this talk about health. Some Goldman Sachs analyst was telling them, it doesn't make any sense to cure a disease, because then you don't make as much money as when they come back and keep coming back and keep coming back. So anyhow.
It's a distressing kind of thing, because within our Revolution Helena, we have been doing a lot of work on the tremendous healthcare needs that are not being met in the United States.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up at the April 28th meeting was the discussion that there really is enough money to meet everyone's healthcare needs. But the money is money in the healthcare system is primarily going to the insurance companies, and to the pharmaceutical companies, and that they're charging extraordinary amounts of money.
Their profit margins went up.
And if we could control that corporate influence on the healthcare system.
Right. Well, I agree with you, but that's why we've got to go to again, another hard revolution issue, which is single payer or single source medical. I think the real thing for people I keep trying to get people to recognize this. Health insurance has nothing to do with health care. Health insurance is who is controlling your gateway to health care. Health care is about what you eat, how you control your diet, what you do in terms of medications and disease and the management of exercise. Do you have a decent place to live, access to clean water? Those are all health issues. And what instead we've done in this country is put, again, talk about another absurd corporate intervention. Why do we have health insurance companies? I mean, I always use the example. Our national parks are in distress because of the way the budget has been cut back on our national parks. Would the answer to be to hire insurance companies to fix our national parks? No, that's crazy. Why did we allow the idea of hiring insurance companies to handle our healthcare needs? It's an absurd solution to a problem. Everybody has a problem, but when you look at every country has the problem of dealing with the healthcare for their citizens. But what we've done is let some people intervene in a way, and without getting into the whole historical reason, it was a corporate response to unions, the fact that unions were supplying health care to their membership, and so they decided that if they could control it, then they wouldn't have to become unionized. It would be one of the things. It was tied to an idea back in the war when there was a law that they couldn't raise people's salaries, but they could expand their benefits. That's where the real beginning of health care supply by your employer came
Interesting.
from during World War II. But later on, it got distorted in the 50s because people were trying to push back against as unions were growing. And what that comes down to me, which is something that in the meeting we had on the 28th, which I thought was a great thing, no matter which issue that you're focused on, whether it's access to public lands or health care or voting rights, I mean, go across the board. If we don't get this one solved, all of the other ones will just languish and be in this uphill battle because there is so much money out there being poured into defeating all of these various issues that are really issues of we the people that we're not going to get anywhere. So I agree with the idea that no matter what you think your number one issue is, make it number two until we get this one, and then make this the number one issue. Let's.
I think we all need to have be a movement that stays together.
Right.
Yeah.
So the idea of controlling the power of money in politics is that root issue.
Right.
Okay. I want to thank both of you for being here today. We have to conclude today's program, but I want to mention one really important thing that's going to happen in July, is that Kimberly Reed, a filmmaker from Helena, now working in New York City, will be bringing her film Dark Money into the Montana theaters. And we'll probably also show it at the Myrna Loy here in town. But it's gotten rave reviews, but it looks at dark money in Montana politics and all the shenanigans that occurred in the 2016 races, local and federal. And so Kim will be in town, and we friends with her, and we'll have her here at Helena Civic TV and Our Revolution Helena to talk about her movie Dark Money. Right. So I want to thank everyone for being with us today on Our Revolution Helena. Join the movement to reintroduce democracy into our economic and political system. Thank you very much.